Hello, I'm Don Mooers. Welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. 2016 has been an eventful year on the national stage as well as here in Montgomery County and throughout Maryland. Brian Karem, executive editor of the Sentinel newspaper, is here to review some of the big news stories for us. Healthcare is changing. Providers are trying to respond to these changes, even as we don't know the fullness of the changes, the upcoming Congress and the new president. CCI Health and Wellness Services is no exception as they try to get ready for 2017. Dr. Sonya Bruton, who is the COO of the organization CCI, is here to explain. The Beacon continues to provide news we can use, both within the senior community as well as in the population of the rest of our county, indeed, and the rest of the DC metropolitan area. Stuart Rosenthal, editor and publisher of the Beacon, has some important stories from the December issue, as well as he's going to highlight some of the big issues, some of the big stories from this past year as well. Mental health, I'm not sure whether we say it's a challenge or opportunity or what have you, but certainly the understanding of mental health is getting larger and larger, greater and greater, as people recognize that they need help with mental health issues. None of us is immune from them. Laura Laskofski from EveryMind, formerly the Mental Health Association, will review successes and opportunities from 2016. Brian Karem, welcome back.
Thank you, Don.
Great to have seen you, Stuart. Others at this morning's Committee for Montgomery breakfast. No, we're not worthy, but it was great. I mean, and I think a lot of what the Sentinel talks about, what the Beacon talks about, what others, it really gets into how do we look at issues together as one. Certainly there's differences, but to try to advance this community.
Well, the community has had a lot of issues so far this year. I guess there's two big issues that we've dealt with news-wise and two subsets of those. The biggest one, of course, was the national elections. And because of that, Montgomery County, not just Maryland, but Montgomery County specifically, will be playing a large leadership role in the Democratic Party in 2017 with Chris Van Hollen and Jamie Raskin. Right. A subset of that particular election was the increase in hate crime and misogyny and racism that we've seen in Montgomery County as well.
As a result of sort of the open season by
politicians on people. As there was a politician, local gentleman, Ben Kramer, who told me this morning, he says, I thought we stopped dealing with these issues 40 years ago and put them to rest, and we haven't.
It's like the rise up of the non-PC crowd to like say everything that they felt like they couldn't say, and say it just for the sake of.
There has been an empowering of the far radical right that you cannot deny. I get it in emails. I've had threats. Okay, so those are.
No, but I know there's a lot of questions but one of the issues I want to just come back to that election is: do you think we're going to see issues in terms of the workforce in Montgomery County? I know there's been discussion among the Republicans of
that goes back to
starving the government. Are we going to see more people
out of work?
People losing jobs in the government?
Well, probably not, because of the other big issue, and that is infrastructure. And in Montgomery County in particular, we did a 6-month-long investigation just on water in Montgomery County, and you can't right now, if you replaced at the current replacement rate, it'd take 120 years to replace the water pipes in Montgomery County, so you're going to have jobs. The other part of that with infrastructure, the biggest infrastructure story is, of course, the metro.
The metro.
Bursting into flames, running off the rails, being delayed, people getting killed. It's
Does
a
the metro
mess.
have a new name in 2016?
Help?
Hasn't it been kind of like Poor Metro, or I mean, there's something that's come up.
Help me.
Yeah.
The metro is, the biggest problem is it hasn't had a real strong leader. And if you're divvying out the responsibilities over 6 different government entities, it's a problem managing it. Now, hopefully, they're starting to tackle some of the issues, but they haven't invested in the infrastructure That's a huge problem, infrastructure all over the
But getting money from each of the jurisdictions is as much a problem as anything else.
Well, everybody wants to gripe if they don't get what they want out of their slice of the pie.
And even getting money, period. I mean, part of the metro is to provide access and transportation to those who need it. And one of the things that I wonder about is what's it doing in terms of the cost, who's paying for it, is it going to be passed along?
Well, the money's there. It's just how it's been allocated. And that's the big question. Have the managers managed the infrastructure well? It's part of the problem, like with Pepco for years, look, they're just a transmission company. They just transmit the electricity, and they couldn't keep the lines open. So, you have the electricity going down on a warm, quiet day. And finally somebody said, hey, you got to invest in your infrastructure. And so that's the come to Jesus moment that they're now having in Metro is, you know what, you can only take so much money out. The money you put in has got to be invested if you want this thing to work.
Part of the problem that was getting it fixed is putting so many people off the Metro and driving and getting other ways to work that we may have fewer customers paying
Well, ridership is down, and that's one of the big problems that they're having to face is that people, now that they found alternatives to Metro, they're going, hey, you know what? I'm better off not, I'm not bursting into flames. I'm not sitting in traffic for, in a car filled with smoke.
Yeah, but I think it's back to Sonia's point is people who need Metro, who
Well,
can't afford the Ubers or to park in these horrendous
Or the
parking-
bus or whatever.
Well, the bus, and are we seeing a concomitant increase in bus service even as Metro is going down?
No, that's another big problem. And Metro they have not dealt well with the fact that this is a growing area and the demand for, public transportation is growing exponentially. You look at 270, you look at 495, and this morning we were talking in the legislative agenda going forward, transportation is a huge part of
What
that,
about 30
and
seconds?
infrastructure.
30 seconds left. You talked a little bit about Chris Van Hollen and Jamie Raskin as positives coming election. Anything positive in the county? Anything you see looking ahead to
Depends
2016?
on who you
really
talk
quick,
to.
really quick.
The biggest thing coming out is the term limits. So we're going to see 4 members of the council, and they're probably all going to run for county executive. So that'll be fun. If nothing else, going forward, county politics here is going to be a lot of fun. TheSentinel.com, you'll see it all.
Anybody coming out? They just gave us 10 more seconds. Anybody coming out besides the 4 county council members? Do you see another big money person like a Trone or Delaney coming out of nowhere?
There was talk.
Trump?
If they're coming from nowhere, I can't see them. But there is talk that there are several people with cash on hand who would like to make themselves well known in the county. We'll see. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of fun. And
if people want to learn more, where can they learn it?
TheSentinel.com.
All right. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Sonya, welcome.
Thank you.
I understand this is your first time on our show.
It is the first time.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thanks.
We are very familiar with CCI on this show. Maybe if real brief, you could just talk about what CCI is. You're the chief operating officer.
That's correct.
As I understand. I had a chance to sit next to your boss at breakfast this morning, and she just went on and on about how great you are. So here's your chance to share that greatness with our viewership.
Absolutely glad to do it because I can go on and on about how great CCI is. And CCI is basically a nonprofit doctor's office. We're a primary care practice that, because of our nonprofit status and support from the federal government, we are able to take the provision of primary medical care, stuff that you go to, prevention, your everyday illnesses, and add to that a bunch of other services to take care of the whole body. We have behavioral health, we have dental. We serve the refugee population. We also go to some of those longer chronic diseases. We go from diabetes to hypertension all the way up to HIV and AIDS, and provide care so that all of us can live happier, healthier, and more productive lives in this county and contribute.
What drew you to CCI? You've got your doctorate, you've got your, you could be any place, but what was it about this organization?
Don, I think drew me is the exact right lead in to answer that question. The way that the community health center network and movement works throughout the country is once you're in, you can try to get out and you just can't. I've been getting my health care at community health centers since I was born way back in the 60s, and have been in and out of them in some fashion all throughout the years. When I moved to Montgomery County in 2008, the first place that I looked to get my own care was a community health center, and that for me was CCI. I've been a patient there. Since then, off and on, went away to New Hampshire for a while, came back, and I'm back at CCI.
So how worried are you that with the new administration coming in that you're going to have adequate funding?
Because I've been around long enough to see that primary care provided to everybody in a community, regardless of whether they have coverage or not, has been something that Republicans and Democrats and independents and all political figures have supported in the past. I'm not exactly afraid so much as it's just, what is it going to be? What are we going to have to do? And also, CCI is well positioned. In any industry, in any time, performance protects you, and we're a high performer. So I'm not worried, but I'm watching.
What you mentioned, you've been a patient. Now, you are not someone who I would previously thought would be a typical patient of CCI. I know nothing about your background,
Sure.
and you grgrew up in a log cabin. I don't, no running water. I don't. But here, you're an accomplished professional, and yet your CCI is your primary health provider. How is that? Because my understanding, looking at the WIC program and refugees and all of this, is that CCI's primary objective is serving those who would be outside of the insurance and the Kaisers and the others that people who can afford health care go to.
And so part of what gives CCI its place in the community is that it will serve the entire community, and it makes sure that it does serve the entire community. We serve as part of that safety net, making sure that nobody falls through the cracks. But in its most pure design, it's really meant to be almost like any other entity that serves the community. It's supposed to bring all the members of the community together, and it's because of people who can afford to provide for their care that we have the resources to provide for those who do not. So both need to come together.
You provide for refugees.
Correct.
So again, I go back to the question I asked, aren't you a little concerned that you're going to be under scrutiny because of the things that have been said during the election?
Here's the thing about health. We're part of that public health spectrum, and most people tend to know that when people are here, they're here, and while they're here, you want them to be healthy. Right. You want somebody to be taking care of them.
Are your patients voicing concern? Have you had to address any of those issues with, some of the refugees, new immigrants? Are you seeing a decrease in patients coming in?
We're not seeing a decrease. We do see concern. Anything that receives federal support, any place where somebody's information is known and your medical provider knows your name, your address, your telephone number. So we, just like other entities, schools are another one that's coming up right now, where we have people's data and have their accurate information. They're a little concerned. It's not keeping them from attending to their health right now.
Do you accept Medicare and have older patients as well?
We do accept Medicare. In our system, we still do skew more toward the younger population, but we do have a segment of our population that comes from that senior
Because some seniors are having trouble finding doctors who are accepting Medicare nowadays, so you would be able to take them on?
We are able to take them. We want them. We cover them from the beginning of life to the end of life, and that's part of our mission, to cover every single life phase.
CCI.net.org, right?
CCIweb.org.
CCIweb, right. We're done, unfortunately, in this segment. I'd love to continue with both of you, but we're going to have to go to the second segment right after these messages. Thank you all for being such.
Well, we love you too, Don.
And we're back. Stuart, welcome back.
Thank you, Don.
Again this morning, I enjoyed being there with
great.
you. Great event. Holidays, we think of all the joy and the lights, whether it's Hanukkah or Christmas, and family and gift giving.
Generations come together and they talk. So but
you also talked, and you've mentioned this before, it's time for the talk.
Yeah, we often have a story in the beginning of December that talks about that very issue. When you have the family together, maybe the older adults should call the younger ones aside and say, look, I wanted to tell you this is how I'd like to be remembered, or what furniture do you want? Let's talk about these sort of kinds of issues. And also you want your family to know how you want to be treated health-wise in terms of your
end of life issues.
Do not resuscitate and all those kinds of orders and things of that sort. So that's a very heavy kind of thing to do in the middle of the holidays. But we do.
Sure,
but you get it right together. Sometimes it's practical.
Before we cut the turkey or whatever.
Right.
Let's talk about death.
You cut the
resuscitate or no resuscitate,
right.
or else you
The
get
turkey
no
or me?
Right. So we didn't do that this year. After having said all that, instead we have a couple stories along the same lines. But this is writing your own obituary.
Yeah.
It's catching on very, very fast, especially in connection with all the new websites out there that allow people to memorialize themselves. So it gives you a chance, you think about it, you can inject your own personality, your own sense of humor, you can tell your story the way you want it to be told and not sort of just imagine that someone's going to be, crying through their handkerchief trying to remember things about you, or some minister who's never met you before is going to be, eulogizing you. So write your own story, tell your way you want to do it, and when you're doing that, you might also realize as you're thinking it through that, well, wait a minute, I meant to do these things in my life and I didn't get them done, or here's my bucket list, or that was a relationship I really should have
it's interesting.
closed off differently.
I find, very sadly, with looking at obituaries, I find them inspirational.
They are.
And folks that you had no idea. You occasionally see a neighbor. And it's just the neighbor. It was the neighbor whose dog pooped on your yard. It's an old man or old lady. I wish they would just do it. And it turns out
that was in their obituary.
No, then it turns out that they've been fighting to find a cure for malaria, or they were on the beach of Okinawa, or what have you. Those individuals who don't talk about those things, if they're doing their own obit, it's going to die with them, because they're not going to go and broadcast.
Well, they might do it in print. If they say, this is my last legacy that I'm leaving to my family and the next generations, they might put it all together. That's the concept. But if you're not wanting to do, you don't want to do that kind of thing, you don't have to.
It is
People
your life.
eagerly-
It's an option.
Do people eagerly jump in on that? I mean, I would
It-
assume they would.
It's catching on. It's catching.
I
They
would
have
wonder
classes
about
in how to
one of
do
these.
that.
But I'm wondering, it seems like you've got those people who I'm going to have the last word, so you
Yes.
get those control folks that are
Narcissistic.
that are motivated. But then I also wonder, in this age of where we talk about fact checking and not fact checking, is it your chance to spin your own tale?
That's true.
Right.
Right.
Of
Right.
course,
I
if
invented the internet.
Yeah.
Right. I never. Right. Exactly.
And you can tell the family history that the kids may not know, the things you've always meant to tell people, but no one ever
Who's going to
asked.
fact check your
Right.
obituary?
Right.
But what I've seen in these self-written obits a lot is advice to the next generation. Is one thing I've learned in my life is don't take any day for granted.
Ethical
Be
wills
joyful.
is a very strong
Yeah.
Jewish tradition to provide that kind of thing to the next generation. So
Yeah.
that's
We try to do it in the Catholic faith too, a little bit.
And
Yeah,
how
we
much
have guilt.
cleanup?
We've
How
got
much
guilt
cleanup
down.
is required? If someone's not a great writer, are they able to get it in and know that
well,
you guys will
that-
make it look good and sound good?
Well, I suppose. I mean, the classes that are offered are telling you how to write it in a way that's simple and straightforward and that conveys who you are. So you're right. You might want a little bit of help with that, I suppose, depending on how much of a ham you are and those things.
Now, our next guest and her husband are looking for a place to go on vacation. Do you have any place that
Our travel section this month is very nice. It's about Curacao.
Okay.
And Curacao is sort of like the gem of the Caribbean that no one ever thinks about and they don't talk about very much. A lot of Dutch influence from the 17th century when it became a colony. It's like the beautiful islands with the pastel homes and whatnot, and fishing and beautiful beaches. I haven't been myself, but it sounds really great from the story. So I think it sounds like a fun place
Is
to
the
be.
Beacon going to run a Visit Curacao competition?
I think I'd get a bottle of it and drink. It's a liqueur, right? So, but we also have a companion story by the wife of the travel writer who wrote the main story, and she went along for the trip, of course. And she went to this sea aquarium, I think it is, and she talks about swimming with stingrays and dolphins and sea
How do you
lions
get
and
that
stuff.
job?
Yeah, it's not a job. It's
know.
available to
Well,
to
she was a
tourists.
job for her to go
No,
out.
the,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
travel
she
writer.
married the guy.
That's-
Yeah, that sounds
I ask my
fabulous.
travel
Yeah.
writer that all the time.
Now, did you find it was something
got
that
30
was
seconds
great
left.
for a getaway, for a quiet getaway, or something to bring the whole family, bring the grandkids and the kids?
It could be either. It depends. I think this SeaWorld thing was a wonderful thing for kids to get to
I can't
experience.
say Curaçao's a long way away. It's as far away as you
It
can
is.
get in
It is
the
far.
Caribbean. And hopefully
It's an
Venezuela
expensive
will
airfare,
be we'll have be more friends because it's right off of the coast of Venezuela.
But they stayed at a resort. There was something like a 3-night package for $600. It wasn't too bad.
Oh,
So
okay.
Oh, that's nice.
Let's go.
I wish we could talk health issues and everything else,
just find them in the Beacon.
but fine. Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you.
Laura, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
As with Sonya, this is your first time on the show.
It is, yes.
And you're with a newly named organization that's been with us for a long time as the mental health organization. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the new name and what brought it
Sure.
about.
So the new name is EveryMind, and we were formerly the Mental Health Association. And the purpose for the new name really has been kind of a long time in the coming, trying to be a little broader in looking at mental health and wellness, kind of trying to get away from the stigma of mental illness, which Mental Health Association kind of refers to.
Right.
So that's really where the name change came.
But it sounds to me a lot like what Sonya's talking about, being a community health provider for everyone.
Correct.
And you all doing the same thing, aren't you? I mean, I think, is there anybody in our community who has not had a mental health issue at some point in their lives, whether it's depression, it's an emergency, it's a crisis, it's something? I mean, some need medication, but all of us are, our minds are,
Right. I think all of us
things,
have,
but yes.
a mental wellness and health to look after. And so there might be a continuum. There's some people that, like with physical illness, they may need medication and there's more of an illness. And then others, they may need some self-care and other tips to address and keep their mental wellness at the highest level.
What's the most common problem you run across?
I think there is the depression and anxiety are pretty common issues that people encounter. And, really just keeping anxiety.
On the increase since the election?
Potentially. No comment. Yeah, I think depression and anxiety are pretty commonly seen clinically. And, but, what we like to do with our community education is kind of give an overview of what can happen and how people can.
I'm thinking part of that too is kind of that I know it's time when. Because we talked about it being a continuum, and part of that continuum is we all have breakdowns, but when does that breakdown get to the point where you need to actually reach out for a little more assistance?
Right. And that's kind of what we try to let people know, that there are things that they can do when they're feeling, stressed and emotionally fret, and they can take some self-care tips and do those things, but there is also resources in the community that they can reach out to if they do need to talk with a therapist.
That's the most
You have a
common
course, right,
misconception.
of some sort?
We do. We have a course called Mental Health First Aid, which is an 8-hour course for really not the mental health professional. It's really looking to educate the public, faith leaders, educators, even if it's a parent who's concerned about their child.
People who may see something or
Exactly.
pick up
And
a
What's
sign.
the most common misconception that lay people have about mental health?
I think it's that it's an other person's issue, that it doesn't have anything to do with their family, themselves, and it's something to be concerned about other
Pride?
people. Probably, yeah. I mean, I think it's the stigma. The stigma remains to get treatment, and I think
Means you're weak.
Right, and I think one really important step in healthcare is that there's been an integration of care, so people can see their primary care doctor, and if there is an issue, they can also see their behavioral health provider in the same venue.
But I think, getting to your point, I think it's also not just the stigma, but it's with employers. It's
Right.
It's not the same. Okay, I
broke my knee.
wrenched
I need
my
help.
knee.
Yeah.
And okay, you did that, but I had depression. I've been seeing somebody. I'm medicated. There is just something there. We're not in
It's seen as
the
a
workforce.
weakness and not a health problem.
Yeah,
And that's where it's trying to
the
go.
overriding-
Personal failing. And
It's
stuff,
it,
yeah.
and
Right.
when I have people, who have worked for me, who have come to me and said, "Listen, I got to have," I go, "Take it." I mean,
Mental health
That's
day.
the mental. If you got a mental health
Sure.
day, take it. They're built into your. We have sick leave days.
Working for
built
you,
into
I
it.
understand.
Yeah,
You're-
I can plug one.
Right, yeah,
I
yeah.
tell you, it's tough. But the point is I've actually had people who've come to me and they are surprised when you don't react that way.
Sure.
There's this whole other spectrum, though.
We've got about a minute left in the second.
Okay, about just being afraid to know.
Yeah.
Afraid to find
Sure.
out that I have something, whatever the one you don't want to have, the one that
Cancer.
that you're afraid of. In the body,
Yeah.
it might be cancer. In the mind, it might be
Depression,
bipolar. It might
Right.
be schizophrenia. It might be PTSD.
And
from what I
yet, when
hear.
you come and
Yeah,
you face
I've seen
it
that
and you
one a
can
lot.
know what to do and you can address it, the whole world opens up for you.
Yes.
That's the great irony, isn't it?
Right. I mean, that's kind of what we get, that's our education point. Let's educate people that there are options for them. There is treatment, and they can feel better and really get back to feeling great in their life.
Do you refer people to particular doctors? How does that work?
So we have some community direct services that we work with, and some providers that we refer to.
CCI.
And CCI. I think we do work closely with CCI.
we
actually,
do see some of those that she named.
What a great way to sort of, as we end this program, because again, each of you's got something to offer, and it's all about the community. And I want to say, I'm proud to have you all here. It's this
Thanks.
last show of 2016. Thank you for joining me
Happy
today.
holidays, brother.
Thank
you.
all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Moores. Join us next week and every week through 2017 at this very same time for the next edition of Montgomery Week in Review.